מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה. מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה. מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה. היי! מי שנכנס אדר, מי שנכנס אדר, היי, מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה. מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה. מי שנכנס אדר, מי שנכנס אדר, מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה. מי שנכנס אדר מרבים בשמחה. אשר ישלטו היהודים המה בשונאיהם. אשר ישלטו היהודים המה בשונאיהם. חג פורים, חג גדול ליהודים, מסכות, רשנים, שיר וריקודים. חג פורים, חג גדול ליהודים, מסכות, רשנים, שיר וריקודים. אמן אלישע, ברשנים. אמן אלישע, ברשנים. ברשנים. בימי אחשוורוש, בימי אחשוורוש, המולך בהודו ועד כוש, 7 מומי המדינה, 7 מומי המדינה. המולך בהודו ועד כוש, המולך הודו ועד כוש, 7 מומי המדינה, 7 מומי המדינה. חייבים איש ליביסומי, חייבים איש ליביסומי. אני לא ידע, אז קבוע על עץ.
מרדכי יצא מלפני המלך בלבש מלכות ועטרת דם. מרדכי יצא מלפני המלך ושושן צהלה ושמחה.
ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה, וששון. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה, וששון ויקר. שושנת יעקב צהלה ושמחה, לראותם יחד תכלת מרדכי. שושנת יעקב צהלה ושמחה, לראותם יחד תכלת מרדכי. תשועתם הייתה לנצח ותקוותם בכל דור ודור. ברוך מרדכי היהודי, ברוך היהודי. ליהודים הייתה אורה, אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה, אורה ושמחה ויקר. כן תהיה לנו אורה ושמחה וששון 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 ויקר.
ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר.
ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר. יהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה, אורה ושמחה. ליהודים הייתה אורה, ושמחה וששון ויקר. ליהודים הייתה אורה, אורה ושמחה. ליהודים הייתה אורה, אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי עם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך.
Okay, Shavua Tov, everyone, and Purim Sameach. Or is it Purim today? that's one of the things we're going to talk about. When is Karaites Purim, or shall we say, when was the Purim that was laid out in the Book of Esther meant to be celebrated? And I will give you a hint. It's maybe not today, but we will talk about it. So, welcome everybody. We're going to be. This is the. How did I officially call it? Let me bring it up. There we go. The Megilath Esther Nahafoch-Hu. So Nahafoch-Hu is perhaps the crux of the Book of Esther. Everything turns on its head in the Book of Esther. Everything's reversed. So this is the Nahafoch-Hu Purim talk by the World Alliance of Qara'im. I am Megilath Ben Yaakov of that very name, World Alliance of Qara'im, and we will touch on all of those concepts. My intention is for this talk to last about 2 hours or so. It's not going to be as long as, well, 2 hours is a long time anyway, but it's not going to be as long as the Shabbat Torah studies because it's a weekday and I have things I need to do, or else I would probably sit and do it all day long. But it should be long enough, 2 hours or so, 1.5 to 2 hours is the plan. It should be long enough to get through the most of the Book of Esther. So that's what we're going to try to do. Let me bring up the Book of Esther. But before we do, okay, let me share the screen. Okay. But before I do, let's talk about what today is. What day is today? So if we bring up the World Alliance of Qara'im site, we can look at when the last new moon, oops, there's a typo there. I'll deal with that later. The new moon report, Monday 11th, March 24th. So the new moon was last seen on 11th of March, March 11th. That was today's Monday, the 25th. That was 2 weeks ago exactly. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, it was seen in the evening of Monday, March 11th. That means tonight, since today's 2 weeks later exactly, March 25th in the secular calendar, that means tonight is the 2-week anniversary of the sighting of this month's new moon, the new moon of the 13th month. How do we know it's the 13th month? Because we didn't see Aviv barley yet. We didn't find almost right barley in any significant amount. And I can go on to a whole long talk about that, but that's for another time and another place. So oops. So that means tonight, when the sun sets, that would be the beginning of the 15th day of the 13th month. Okay. Now, Purim, as we shall see in the Book of Esther, is meant to be kept on the 14th and 15th day of the 12th month, or of Adar. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to actually raise a question that I've had for many years. And we have another group called the Biblical Calendar Society. You're more than welcome to join that. If you're not part of the Biblical Calendar Society, you probably want to be. So there we do new moon reports, we do Aviv barley reports, and we have ongoing discussions about the biblical calendar, most notably on our WhatsApp group. So let me post the information for the Biblical Calendar Society for anyone who doesn't have it. Where is it? There we go. I'll just put this up in the comments. There we go. And we have a, if I show it, it's going to be a mess, right? Yeah, don't forget that. And we have a lot of vigorous discussions, especially in our WhatsApp group, ongoing discussions about the biblical calendar. So you can check that out and you can get involved with the Biblical Calendar Society. At any rate, the point is that So we are right now in the 14th day of the 13th month, according to the biblical calendar. Tonight starts the 15th day of the 13th month. So are we in Purim right now? Or are we not in Purim? Well, the 14th day, as we shall see, Purim is celebrated on the 14th and 15th day of the 12th of Adar, it actually says. But the poor, the lot that was drawn by Haman was on the 15th day of specifically the 12th month. Well, we're in the 13th month. Okay, let's leave that as a question and we'll get to it. Okay, let me, in the meantime, bring up the Book of Esther, and we're going to do it backwards. So I gave my rationale for why I started doing this. I started doing this a bunch of years ago, in person and online. What am I looking for here? Right. So first of all, it's a play on the idea of Nahafoch-Hu, right? Because everything is reversed in Purim. The crux, the main theme. What's the word? The main, I guess we'll call it the crux of the Purim story of the Book of Esther is that everything gets turned on its head. Everything that's supposed to happen to the people of Israel happens to the enemies of Israel. And so that's kind of the theme of the Book of Esther. That's kind of the turning point of the Book of Esther. And we'll get to that famous phrase of Nahafoch-Hu. But that was the play on words, that to do it backwards, right? To do Purim backwards. So everything in Purim is backwards, according to the Book of Esther, or according to the main theme of the Book of Esther. But then actually a practical consideration, and I'll just read from the thingy, yes, and that's the official name, the thingy that I put up to advertise the talk. So it says, years ago, I came to the realization regarding the reading of Megilath Esther, into a realization regarding the reading of Megilath Esther. A large majority of people are either too tired from stamping out the name of Haman, too hungry, or too drunk to pay attention to the entire book. And it's absolutely true. If you ever go to a synagogue, and yes, even though I'm a Karaite, when I'm in places where there are no Karaites around, I will go to rabbinical synagogues. No problem. I have no problem with that, as long as they don't force me to do things that I'm against. I am a Jew after all, and I love being around my fellow Jews. But right. So if you've ever gone to a Megilath Esther reading in a synagogue, it's absolutely true. By the end of the Book of Esther, no one is paying attention anymore. The kids are going crazy. Everyone's hungry. Everyone's tired from screaming at the top of their lungs, and half the people, sometimes including the kids, are drunk. It was a bizarre. I remember in Israel, it was actually a bizarre tradition. I kid you not. That in Israel, for some reason, the children on Purim smoke. They would walk around the streets of Jerusalem smoking actual cigarettes. I'm not talking about bubblegum cigarettes, actual cigarettes. So it is a bit of a strange holiday, especially in Israel. But it's absolutely true, and nobody therefore pays attention to the last. Here we go to the last couple of chapters of the Book of Esther. And let me go on reading here. This is quite unfortunate because the last chapters of the Book of Esther are rich with invaluable information regarding the defensive battles of the Jews against the armies of Haman, as well as the intricacies of the formal establishment of the holiday of Purim, as we shall see. The last 3 chapters deal with these issues. So a number of years ago, I came up with an idea. Let's learn the Book of Esther backwards in the spirit of Nahafoch-Hu, spirit of, right, everything's upside down. That's right. We'll start from the 10th chapter and work our way backwards, chapter by chapter, to the first. Not only does this give us a unique opportunity to focus on the details of the Purim holiday, which is so often brushed over, but it also gives a completely new and fresh perspective on the entire Purim story. Okay, so that's the rationale. So there's a kind of a fun rationale behind it to tap into this idea of Nahafoch-Hu, but there's also a practical rationale behind it, which is that the last couple of chapters of the Book of Esther are basically ignored by almost everybody. They're considered, well, I gave, everyone's drunk, tired, and hungry. But on top of it, it's boring and technical. Like, who cares about the details of the letter that Mordechai sent out and the letter that Esther sent out? But they're rich with information about how the Purim holiday was established. And as Karaites, this is kind of essential, because we are, as Karaites, we're trying to stick as close to the Tanakh as possible, stick as close to the way that the ancient Israelites understood the Tanakh as we can. And so this gives us a lot of information, because other than that, we just kind of get our information from whatever the Jewish world, says is the case, which is generally, rabbinical thought. Okay, so that's the idea behind this reverse study, and it also gives a really unique perspective on the Book of Esther, because when you do something in reverse, you kind of see the end before the beginning. So you see how the end, instead of seeing how the beginning leads to the end, you see how the end leads back to the beginning, if that makes any sense. There was a movie that I saw many years ago. I think it got rave reviews and all this kind of stuff, but I'm trying to remember what it's called. But it's everything takes place backwards. The guy, he's lost his short-term memory, and when you're introduced to the movie, you see him and he's just living his day-to-day life. He has all these little notes to remind little things, and so we catch him kind of as he knows nothing. He's in his life, and then slowly but surely he reveals how he got to his current situation. And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the movie, but I do remember that it was a brilliant movie, right? So when you take things backwards, you get a very unique perspective on a story. And so that's a third reason to look at the Book of Esther backwards. Maybe we should study all the books of Torah backwards. Maybe we should start at the end of Deuteronomy and work our way back to Bereshit. No, I'm being facetious. But in the case of Esther, it really does give us a unique perspective on the book. So with that being said, let's dig in. We're going to go to the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther has 10 chapters. The last chapter, chapter 10, is extremely short. And then a lot of the beef that we want to tackle with regards to the establishment of the holidays is in the last half of chapter 9. So we'll focus a lot there, and then we'll make our way backwards as long as we can. As I said, I'll go for about 2 hours or so, maybe a little more, but for about 2 hours, and we shall see where we get and what we learned. Okay, so that being said, here we are in Book of Esther, chapter 10. Let me just do a quick sound check. So you guys can all hear me? Everybody can hear me? Yes? Phil, give me a yes, please. If you can hear me, I believe so. I'll wait for confirmation. Yes, no? All right. You guys can hear me, right? Going once, going twice. If I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume you can hear me. So that's what my details here on my screen say, that the sound is on and working. Okay? Let me just type it to make sure. Yes. Okay, good. That confirmation. Because we've had situations where I was on mute and I didn't know it, or there was some other technical problem. Okay, so here we are in chapter 10 of the Book of Esther. And our English heading here gives us a little hint of what we're going to speak about. Okay, tribute to Xerxes and Mordecai. Okay. Weisema Melech, and I'll translate. Weisema Melech Achashverosh mas al haaretz wa ie hayam. So King Achashverosh placed a tax or tribute upon the land, meaning upon his kingdom, and upon the islands of the sea. Okay, so we know that Persia consisted of 127 provinces, May Hodu at Kush, from India to probably Ethiopia. Well, Kush could sometimes mean different things, and so he's now placing a tax on the people of his kingdom. Why? Let's find out. Verse 2, V'chol ma'aseh takfo gvurato parashat gdulat Mordechai asher gdlo המלך הלא הם כתובים בספר דברי הימים מלכי מדי הפרס. So all of the doings, וכל מעשה תקפו וגבורתו, and all of the doings of his force and his heroism, Parshat Gdulat Mordechai, and the greatness of Mordechai, or the subject of the greatness of Mordechai, And this is speaking about Mordechai, right? It would seem from the context that we're talking about. So, okay, let's read to the end of the verse. Asher Gidlo Hamelech, which the king had made great. Are they not written in the books, the book of the Divrei Yamim, the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia and Media, or Media and Persia? Okay, so somewhere is the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia, just like we have mentioned other places in the Tanakh, the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel, of Judah, right? I don't think this book has ever been found, or even portions of it have ever been found, but boy, that would be great to find it, right? In fact, there's been no, as far as I know, no historical or archaeological evidence that Esther and Mordecai ever existed, or that Esther was ever king. There was one, I'm sorry, queen. There was one queen who it said might have been Esther, but it's definitely from conclusive. That doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just meant that we haven't yet found evidence for it. Okay, so so after this whole incident, right? The King Achashverosh, he had already made Mordechai great, and this kind of solidifies the idea that Mordechai had been made great by King Achashverosh. Okay, had been given a very important position in the court, a court Jew. Verse 3: Ki Mordechai Hayudi Mishneh lemelech Achashverosh, because Mordechai the Jew was second in command to King Achashverosh, v'gadol Yehudim, and was great among the Jews. So this is very interesting. It says he was second in command to King Achashverosh. Who does this remind us of? Okay, of course, this reminds us of Joseph, who was second in command to Pharaoh. Okay, so many scholars, people, whatever you want to call them, have pointed out that there are some similarities between Joseph's story and the Esther story, and maybe we'll focus on that a little bit. But it is interesting that it says here that Mordechai became second command to King Achashverosh, okay, through his adopted daughter Esther. And he was great among the Jews, and he was beloved by the majority of his brothers. Now, I remember I learned with a rabbi many years ago who said, "Oh, that meant that some didn't like him." I don't think that's what this implies at all. It implies that basically everybody loved him. Is basically what it's saying. Doresh tov le'amo, he sought out good for his people, and he spoke peace to all of his seed, all of his descendants. Okay, so that's it. So we have here basically the summary, or the closing theme, or the closing subject in the Book of Esther is basically a glorification of Mordecai, or a description of how great Mordecai was, which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because it's not the book of Mordecai, this is the book of Esther, okay? And Esther was she is the protagonist ultimately of this entire story, but in a certain sense, Mordecai is as well, right? It was Mordecai who encouraged Esther to do what she did, to go in and speak to King Achashverosh. And it was Mordecai who kind of moves the story along. And if we think about it, really, Esther, aside from what she did with King Ahasuerus, is kind of a very passive figure in the entire story, right? Things happen to her; she doesn't really take the reins. It's really Mordecai who's behind the whole thing here, when you think about it. Okay, now it's true. Esther was a woman, and women in traditional societies, and there's nothing wrong with the thing, tend to be a bit, a bit more passive, right? They work behind the scenes, shall we say, not in the overt capacity. And so, so I think that the fact that at a certain point doesn't do that and takes the reins, just shows how much she was ready to move out of her traditional role to do what she needed to do for the people of Israel. Okay, so that's chapter 10. Okay, so then we should think maybe it should really be called the Book of Mordecai, not the Book of Esther, but it's called the Book of Esther. Okay, now we go back to chapter 9. Okay, and this is speaking about the war, or the defensive war that the Jews waged against the armies of Haman that had come to attack them. And we'll see where that comes from in chapter 8. But let's talk about the actual details here. Okay, so we're in chapter 9, verse 1. בשנים עשרה חודש וחודש אדר, 13 יום בו, אשר הגיע דבר המלך ודעתו להיעשות ביום אשר סיברו אויבי היהודים לשלוט בהם, ונהפוך הוא אשר ישלטו היהודים המה בשונאיהם. Okay, so first of all, now we have the first indication of when this action is taking place. So it's on the 13th day. Okay? Of what month? Of the 12th month. ב-12 חודש הוא חודש אדר. Okay? In the 12th month. Well, we're not in the 12th month right now. We're in the 13th month. This is an intercalated year, at least in the biblical calendar. Aviv was not found at the beginning of the previous new moon, as I mentioned, on 2 weeks ago, on Monday, March 11th. So we're actually in the 13th month right now. We're in a leap month. So really, should we be celebrating Purim a month ago? Well, that's traditionally what I do. I usually celebrate Purim in the 12th month. If this is the 13th month, I celebrate in the 12th month. And I can tell you a bit about the reasoning for celebrating it in the 12th month rather than the 13th month. And that is because if we're in the middle of the 12th month, we don't yet know whether Aviv is going to be found at the end of the 12th month or not. If Aviv is found, if Aviv barley, almost ripe barley, is found at the end of the 12th month, there's no 13th month. So you can't celebrate in the 13th month. So really, logically speaking, there was no possibility. If you're going to have a holiday, you couldn't say it's in the 13th month. It's like saying, it's like someone who's born on February 29th and has a birthday only every 4 years, something like that, right? So really, logically speaking, it would seem it should be celebrated in the 12th month, because in the middle of the 12th month, we don't know if there's going to be a 13th month. And if there's not a 13th month, which I would say about half the time, more than half the time there isn't, then Purim is never celebrated. Okay. However, what the rabbis do is since they have a calculated calendar, the calendar of Hillel II, they will celebrate it when it's an intercalated year, when there's an extra month added, the 13th month. They'll celebrate it on the 14th and 15th of the 13th month, because they believe that Purim should always come right before Passover. It's basically linked to Passover, and that's a nice idea. But again, if we have a biblical calendar, I don't think it holds up. Okay, so then the question becomes, why am I doing the talk today? Today is the 13th month, as I mentioned. Why didn't I do it a month ago? Well, as you know, if you join the Torah studies, I try to stick to what most of the Jewish world is doing, because for good or for bad, that's where their thoughts are at any given time. And I try to make these talks relevant, not just to us Karaites, but to everybody, with the hope that people will join the movement, or with the belief actually that many people are looking for an alternative. In fact, as I've mentioned, I think a number of times now, since October 7th, there's been a notable uptick in the number of people that have contacted me with interest in Karaism and the World Alliance of Qara'im, and I assume with the other Karaite groups as well. And so as a way to stay relevant on Shabbat, we follow the rabbinical cycle, and so this year, and previous years, I've done it in the 12th month, even when there's been a 13th month. But this year, I decided to do it on the 13th month, stay in sync with the large majority of the Jewish world. And the rabbis, they run the show at this point, whether we like it or not. It's like if you go into a neighborhood where the mafia runs the neighborhood, that's it. You're out of luck. You're stuck with the mafia, whether you like it or not. So we're stuck with the mafia for a little while longer. And people are thinking about Purim right now. They're celebrating Purim today. And so that's the reasoning behind why I did it today rather than last month. Even though we see right here, okay, that and we see really you could never. I mean, I guess you could. You could never really set a holiday for the 13th month, because it wouldn't make sense. You wouldn't be able to set every year. Okay, you couldn't even set it for the last month of the year, because you don't even know what the last month of the year is according to the biblical calendar. It's the new month comes. Well, I guess you could. If you already found Aviv, then the next month is going to be Aviv. But you can't rely on it. Okay, I'm belaboring this too much. I hope that the point is clear. Okay. However, I had an interesting discussion in the WhatsApp group of the Biblical Calendar Society with someone who's very knowledgeable about the biblical calendar, and I discussed with him the idea that all of the months are mentioned somewhere in the Tanakh. The first month, the second month, all the way straight through the 12th month. But the 13th month is never mentioned in the Tanakh. And I'm not talking about a holiday that's supposed to be laid out. I'm talking about just events happening. Let's say the word of the prophet came to him on it'll say like the 7th day of the 8th month, just making it up, right? And it mentions all of the months with regards to events and regards to when prophets had certain visions, but it never ever mentions the 13th month, which I found very curious. And if you want, you can discuss there. Actually, if you haven't already joined, you probably can't see the discussion, but that's for another time. Okay, at any rate, so on the 13th day of that 12th month, Asher, Higeh Devar HaMelech v'dato le'asot b'yom asher sivro oivei HaYudim לשלוט בהם ונהפוך הוא אשר ישלטו היהודים המה בשונאיהם. So this was the day that the enemies of the Jews were supposed to destroy them, to attack them. But it says, Higeh Devar HaMelech v'dato. Okay, so the King Ahasuerus put out a second decree, as we'll see, that allowed the Jews to defend themselves on this day. Okay, so King Ahasuerus did not cancel the decree that the enemies of the armies of Haman are allowed to attack the Jews, and this is because once the law is placed in the annals of or in the law code of Media and Parasas, we shall see it's not to be canceled, it's not to be undone. But he added another law, which he's allowed to do, which the king is allowed to do. And we see there that even the king had rules. It was kind of a constitutional monarchy, or shall we say a monarchy with rules and traditions. He added another law which said that the Jews can defend themselves on this day. Okay, and that's what happens here. And it's actually great because it made us Jews stand up and defend ourselves, right? Okay. So on that day, the Jews reversed the situation, and and the Jews ruled over, or took command over, or what's the word I'm looking for? They prevailed over their enemies. And here we have Nahafoch-Hu. So here we have again this crux, this major theme, this primary theme that we have in the Book of Esther, which is Nahafoch-Hu. Okay, Nahafoch-Hu, again, for those of you who are not so familiar with Hebrew, and I know there are people here with all kinds of different levels of Hebrew, it comes from the underlying root Hafach, Hey, Chaf, which means to overturn, to turn upside down. Okay, for instance, when Sodom is destroyed, Sodom and Gomorrah overturned, they're nefechet, they're turned upside down, they're overturned. So that's what it means. So this means turn upside down. Okay, and that's what happened here. The armies of Haman, the enemies of the Jews, were supposed to attack and destroy them, and this was turned upside down, and they ended up attacking and destroying their enemies. Okay, so here we have that famous phrase Nahafoch-Hu. Okay, and that is exactly right. As I said, one of the motivations for doing this talk backwards. Okay, Nahafoch-Hu means to turn upside down. Right, so we're turning the Book of Esther upside down. We're going backwards from chapter 10 to chapter 1. Okay. Verse 2, V'nikalu hayudim ba'arehem b'chol medinot hamelech Achashverosh. So the Jews gathered together, and nikalu is from the same root as Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, as it's called. And actually the word Ecclesiastes, now that I think of it, may actually be etymologically related to the word Kahal. Not sure, I'd have to look into that, but to gather together. So they gathered together in their cities, in all of the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to literally to send out their hand, but to attack those who sought their evil or sought to do bad things to them. The ish lo amad bifneim, and not a single person or no person stood before him. Ki nafal pachdam al ha'amim, because their fear fell upon the people. Okay, so this is very interesting. Oh boy, I wish we had more time because I could really relate to some interesting things. So their fear fell upon the peoples. In other words, the various peoples of the kingdom that were going to attack the Jews, the fear of the Jews fell upon them, and so not a single person stood before them when they attacked their enemies. Okay, so why did their fear fall upon them? Well, this comes to another major theme that's pointed out by just about everyone regarding the Book of Esther, which is God. Yahweh is never mentioned anywhere explicitly in the Book of Esther, but he is working behind the scenes. We can clearly see. Okay, and I think this may be one of the reasons. So why did their fear fall upon the people? Well, it could be just very simply that it's because King Ahasuerus gave the Jews the right, and he gave them the support to attack their enemies. But maybe behind this is implied that it's really the fear of God that is falling upon the people, as we see in other places in the Torah, that the fear of God fell upon the surrounding nations. For instance, when after Jacob or after Shimon and Levi do their deed in Shalom, Jacob is very worried that the surrounding peoples are going to take revenge upon him. So he basically leaves Shalom, and nothing happens because it says the fear of God was on the people around him. Okay, so maybe this is implying that the fear of God was on the people around them, and therefore they couldn't stand up. They didn't have the heart to stand up to the Jews, and the Jews were able to defeat their enemies. Okay, even if it means just that that the reason they feared the Jews was because King Ahasuerus had given the Jews the green light to defend themselves. Already that shows that the Jews had the support of King Ahasuerus. The entire kingdom would have known that King Ahasuerus' queen was Esther, a Jew. Everyone knew at this point that she was a Jew. She had revealed herself as a Jew. At least everyone in the royal court knew, and I guess the word got out. Okay, and so maybe that's the reason that the people feared the Jews, because they feared King Ahasuerus and they feared Queen Esther. But even if that's the case, then God is behind that, right? So their fear ultimately leads back to God is behind putting that situation into existence, and so God is ultimately behind what is happening there. Okay, even if this doesn't directly mean they feared the Jews because they feared God. So again, that brings us to another major theme in the Book of Esther, which is God. Yahweh is never explicitly mentioned in the Book of Esther, but we see his hand throughout the book. Okay, where are we? We're in verse 3. בכל שרי המדינות והחדר פנים והפחות ועושה המלאכה אשר למלך מנסים את היהודים כי נפל פחד מרדכי עליהם. Okay, so all of the officers, or all of the officers, it's a bad translation, the officials of the kingdoms, this is a Persian, there are a number of Persian words that we see within the Book of Esther. This is one of them, and it's usually translated as satraps. Pachot are viceroys, they usually translate it. Here they translate as governors. So basically all of the officials of the kingdom are, well, it's just minasim, lifting up, literally. But it basically means, I guess, aiding them, giving them support, right? And you lift, literally means, minasim means to lift up, okay? But it means gave them support, okay? Because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. So they feared Mordecai. Why did they fear Mordecai? I guess they feared Mordecai because he had now been put in a very important position. He'd now been favored by the king. Okay? No, in fact, it says here. Verse 4. Because Mordecai was great, was very important in the house of the king, in the king's court. And his reputation went traveled throughout was known throughout all of the provinces. Because this man Mordecai was becoming greater and greater, Okay? His power was increasing. Verse 5. We better speed it up a bit, or we'll never get through even chapter 9. Verse 5. Yaku ayudim b'chol ovehem makat cherev v'hereg v'dan v'avdon v'yasu v'sonehem b'kiritzonam. So the Jews struck all of their enemies with the blow of the sword and killing, the blow of killing, and destruction. And they did with their enemies as they desired. In other words, they had their way with their enemies. They had complete control and dominance over their enemies. Verse 6, B'Shushan Abira, Hargu Yehudim Abed 500 ish. So in Shushan, the capital, Susa, which you could still visit today, the ruins of Susa exist even today. B'Shushan Abira, Hargu Yehudim Abed 500 ish. So the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And then here we have, from here to here, the names of the 10 sons of Haman. Okay, so I won't read through them, just to move ahead a little bit. So those are the 10 sons of Haman. And then verse 10, we pick it up. Ma'aseret b'nei Haman, the 10 sons of Haman, ben Hamadata, the son of Hamadata, Tzored Yudim, the enemy of the Jews, Argu, Ubi Biza lo shachu et yadam. So they killed these 10 sons of Haman, but they didn't take the spoils of these 10 sons. Why didn't they take the spoils? Well, maybe that's what King Ahasuerus had commanded, but on the other hand, maybe they wanted to show, well, we're not in it for the money. We don't want to, we're not here to gain spoils of war. We're just here to destroy our enemies. Okay, 1 second here. Verse 11, B'yomahu ba mispara harugim b'shushan abira lifnei Melech. And on that day, I'll paraphrase here, the number of people that were killed, in other words, people that the Jews killed, were reported to the king. Okay. Now, again, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the 13th day of the 12th month. So this is all happening on the 13th day. Okay, verse 12. Wayomer Hamelech leEsther Hamalka, and the king said to Queen Esther, B'Shushan Abira, in Susa, the capital, Hargu Yehudim v'abed 500 ish, that the Jews have killed 500 people. Ve'et seret b'nei Haman, and the 10 sons of Haman. B'shar medinot hamelech ma asu u'ma she'eletech. So King Ahasuerus reports now. So it was reported to him how many of the enemies of the Jews were killed in Susa, the capital, and now King Ahasuerus reports it or tells it to Esther. Okay. What's it? Aseret b'nei Haman b'shar medinot hamelech ma asu u'ma she'eletech nitem lach u'ma b'katech od v'ta'es. Okay. So basically, now King Ahasuerus says to Esther, what more do you want? I'll give you anything you want. Is there anything more that you want? And verse 13, King Esther says, V'tomer Esther, im ala melech tov, yinaten gam machar Yehudim asher b'Shushan la'asot kedat hayom v'et seret b'nei Haman yitlu ala etz. So I'm going to paraphrase here. You can follow along again in your own translations, or if you know biblical Hebrew, you can follow along in the Hebrew. If not, you can follow along in the English. So Esther requests that the next day the Jews are also allowed to do the same thing, dat hayom, according to the same rules today, meaning that there should be another day when the Jews are able to defend themselves, specifically in Shushan, in the capital, in Susa. Okay, and that's why we have two days of Purim, and this is not, the 2 days of Purim are not a rabbinical invention. They're actually mentioned here in the Book of Esther, as we shall see. That's why we have 2 days of Purim, the 14th and the 15th. Okay, so Esther, so the king says 500 Jews were killed 500 of the enemies of Jews were killed in Susa capital, many more in the surrounding provinces. What else can I do for you, Esther? Anything you ask me, I'll do. And then Esther says, let the Jews in the capital have one more day where they can kill their enemies. Okay, and then ends Seret b'nei Haman yitlu ala etz, and they killed 10 sons of Haman, and now they hanged them. Verse 14. ויאמר המלך לעשות כן, ויינתן דת בשושן ואת 10 בני המן תלו. I'm sorry, I presented this a little bit incorrectly. What Queen Esther requests is that they have another day to kill their enemies that the Jews have another day to kill their enemies in Shushan, in Susa, and also that the 10 sons of Haman be hanged. Okay, and then in verse 14, so that's her request. Oops, verse 14. Let's try that again. ויאמר המלך יעשו כן, ותינתן דת בשושן ואת 10 בני המן תלו. Okay, so the king agrees, and he gives instructions for everything that Esther asks. That the next day, the 15th of the 12th month, the Jews can defend themselves in Susa, in Shushan, and also then he commands. Then he has the 10 sons of Haman hanged. Verse 15. ויקלו היהודים אשר בשושן גם ביום 14 לחודש אדר ויהרגו בשושן 300 איש בביזה לא I'm sorry, I said something wrong again. My apologies. That wasn't the 13th day, the 14th day. They rested on the 15th day. My mistake. So we're talking here about the 13th day and the 14th day. I said the 14th day and the 15th day, I think. My mistake. The 13th day was the first day they were their enemies in Shushan, and now the second day they attacked the enemies is on the 14th day of the 12th month. And that's what we have here in verse 15. So the Jews gathered together in Susa, the capital, also on the 14th day of the month Adar. And notice by this time already the months are being called not just by their numbers, but also by their Babylonian names. Okay, Adar. This is the time. This is the epoch, the era when the Jews are already ruled over by the Medians and the Persians. So this is after the Babylonians fell to Medians and the Persians, and there's still that entire area is using these names, these Babylonian names for the months. That's so we see it almost interchangeable. Okay, יהרגו בשושן 300 איש, בביזה לא שבו את ידם. So on the 14th day, on the second day of the Jews defending themselves, fighting in the capital Susa, they killed another 300 people, and again they didn't take any of the spoils for themselves. Okay, so it's a total of 800 that the Jews killed in Shushan, the capital. And now we get a report for the rest of the provinces. And let's see where. Let's get a map of Susa. So let's see. Just so we can put things a little bit in perspective. So the Shush, ancient Shushan. So let's get it. Now we can read this little thingy here. Quick facts. Shush is a city in the central district of Shush County, Khuzestan province, Iran, serving as the capital of both the county and the district. Shush is beside ancient Susa. That's Shushan that we're reading about here in the Book of Esther. The 2006 national consensus, its population was blah, 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 blah. Okay. So where were we? Where is Shush again? We lose it. Let's keep an eye on it. Get back here. Right there. Shush. Next to Dizful. So it should, as we come out, it should be pretty much in the middle. Right? So we can get an idea of where it is. So right around there. Shushtar. There. Okay. We have a pin dropped on Shush. Okay. So you get an idea of where it is. Okay. So it's actually not that far from Baghdad. I wonder how long it takes to drive. Further from Tehran, not very far from the border between Iran and Iraq, and not too far from Kuwait. We have a friend who lives in Kuwait. Maybe, who knows, maybe I'll go out to Kuwait and we can drive to Shushan together. I've always actually wanted to visit Iran. Iran is a fascinating place to me. Maybe one of these days. Okay, so let's move on. So, so in the rest of the province, so we already found out what happened with Susan in Shushan. Total of 800 killed, 500 on the first day, 300 on the second day. Esther requests that the Jews in Shushan get a second day to fight. And why didn't she request in the rest of the provinces? I could think of two reasons. Number one, maybe the Jews already took care of business in the rest of the provinces, right? But Shushan is the capital. That's where Haman was. That's where everything was going on. So there was a lot more action. There was a lot more, let's say, resistance against the Jews in Shushan, the capital. And also, maybe that's since Mordechai and Esther were there, they could have more direct control over what was happening. Okay. Verse 16, and so the rest of the Jews who were in the provinces of the king, meaning stretched throughout the 127 provinces of the Persian Empire, Nikalu, they gathered together, they assembled ve'amad al nafsham, and they defended themselves. They stood up for themselves, I guess you could say. V'noach me'oivim, v'harag mehem isha, v'shivim elef, v'zah lo shavchu et yadam. So they rested from their enemies, and they had killed, by the time they rested from their enemies, Varag V'Soneim, they had killed of their enemies, 75,000, 75,000, but they did not take any of the spoils for themselves. Okay, so 75,800 total, 800 in the city of Susa, the city of Shushan, in the capital, and 75,000 throughout 127 provinces. Okay, Yom Shlosha Asar LaChodesh Adar. So they did this on the 13th month of Adar. And they rested on the 14th day of that month. And they turned that into a day of feasting and happiness. So here we have something very interesting. This is the first time that we see that the Jews are celebrating something which we could call proto-Purim, okay? And it comes out of something very natural. Shalom. It comes out of something very natural, okay? The Jews in the provinces, they fought on the 13th day, and they destroyed 75,000 of their enemies. And what did they do after the war was over? They defeated their enemies, right? There was no more threat, apparently, after that one day. They celebrated. Okay, how to celebrate? And we're not talking about any kind of instituted holiday here. We're just talking about they completed the battle successfully on the 13th day. On the next, they rested and celebrated. They had a celebratory feast. They had a day of feasting and happiness. Okay, so this is the first time that we see the celebration of, it's not even Purim, of what we can call proto-Purim. Okay, it was just a natural reaction. The Jews finished defeating their enemies on the 13th, and the next day they said, "Hey, we won. Let's declare this a day of celebration and feasting." Okay, and from this is where the holiday Purim grows, and we'll see how it grows here in the rest of the book of chapter 9. So now we see exactly how the holiday develops and how it turns into actually a holiday that's now kept throughout the generations, and we'll talk about what force does it have throughout the generations. Because as many Karaites, I constantly get this question over the years, which is, why do you celebrate Purim? Or are we supposed to celebrate Purim? Okay, Purim is not a holiday ordained by God. So, as Karaites, why should we even celebrate Purim? Well, I think there's a very specific answer to that, which we'll get to as we finish off chapter 9. And then the other question I get is, why should we celebrate Hanukkah? Hanukkah not only is it not ordained by God, it's not even mentioned in the Tanakh. Well, I think there's a specific reason for that, which is kind of similar to the reason for Purim. Although I think obviously Purim has more force because it's Karaites. We have to make a cutoff point somewhere, and that cutoff point for us, and some people might claim it's arbitrary, but you know what? As I always like to say, if it's arbitrary, it's a good arbitrary, is the Tanakh. So Purim is mentioned obviously in the Tanakh, okay, in what later was canonized as the Tanakh. The Book of Esther was included in the Tanakh, despite this fake argument by the rabbis where apparently they wanted to exclude it, but that's for another time and another story. At any rate, so now we have more of the details of how Purim turned into just a feast that the Jews in the provinces celebrated on the 14th day of that actual year after they defeated their enemies, into how it became a holiday that is kept through generations. Okay, so now we go to verse 18. והיהודים אשר בשושן נקהלו ב13 בו ו14 בו. So the Jews who were in the capital, Susa, they they assembled on the 13th day and on the 14th day to fight. The Noach b'hamisha asar bo, and they rested on the 15th day of that month. And they made that day a day of feasting and celebration. So now the Jews in Susa, in the capital, did the same thing, except they did it a day later. They did it on the 15th of that same year, right? We're not talking about a holiday here. We're talking about the same year after they defeated their enemies in Shushan, the capital. Verse 19. Al ken hayudim הפרזים היושבים בפרזות עושים את יום 14 לחודש אדר שמחה ומשתה ויום טוב ומשלוח מנות לאיש לרעהו. Therefore, the Jews who dwell in the Arei Prazot are usually they translate as the cities of the provinces or the towns of the provinces, or they'll sometimes translate as hamlets. Basically means smaller cities that don't have walls around them, okay, unwalled cities, okay. Prazot, from the implication here of the underlying root, is scattered around, okay. Probably related to litfazer with metathesis. We don't need to get into that. Let's see what the BDD says. Now, Fenner, Hamlet, only Purim, blah, 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 Ezekiel, land of Hamlets, opposed to Homa, blah, 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 they don't give it. Walls from Sims Paras. Just stuff for myself more than anyone. Okay, that's for another time. So, at any rate, so the Prazot are the walled cities, right? And those are the smaller, less important cities, because every important city in the world, well, I don't know about in the world, but any important city, pretty much in all of that region, if it were a city of any importance, would have walls around it, right? Walls are a huge issue throughout the Tanakh. When Nebuchadnezzar attacks Jerusalem, actually, it was the chief of his guard, Nabopolassar. Am I saying that name right? I forgot. Nabopolassar, I think is the way it is. He's the one who burns down the walls of Jerusalem and burns down the temple. So when enemies attack the city, an enemy city, well, the first thing he did is to rip down the walls, because the walls represent that the city is a city of importance. It represents that it has protection, that it has honor, that it has glory. Okay? So we're talking about, so there's always a distinction made between the walled cities. And many years ago, I think about 10 years ago, I did a series on the importance of walls and gates in the Tanakh. And I think we did like 3 talks on it. It was very interesting stuff. Okay, I think it's on, if you want to listen to it, it's on World Alliance Qara'im. Let's bring it up for 1 second. Oops. One second. So on the World Alliance of Qara'im, we do have a section called the Archives. So a lot of other talks, not only by me, but by other people as well. You're welcome to check that out. So here we go. The Ancient City Wall, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. So more than welcome to go to the archives. I don't claim to be as knowledgeable 10 years ago as I am now, just as I don't claim that I will hopefully be more knowledgeable in 10 years as I was back then, or as I am now. You know, we're constantly learning and increasing, but it was an interesting talk, I must say. Okay, so so basically, so now we're talking about what happened in the unwalled cities. So now we have a statement. So therefore, the Jews that dwell in the unwalled cities, meaning out in the provinces, okay, they celebrate the 14th day of Adar as Simcha Mishteh, as the day of happiness and rejoicing and feasting, Yom Tov, and a holiday, a good day, Mishloch Manot Ish Le'rehu, and sending of gifts, each person to his fellow man. So now we have a statement, okay, that the Jews they are doing this. Okay, this is before. This seems to be implying that before the holiday was instituted, and we'll see it down below, that the Jews had already started doing this. Okay, that on the on the 14th day, or the Jews living out in the provinces already started celebrating this kind of what we can call proto-Purim. Okay, that every 14th day of the 12th month they would celebrate it as a holiday to commemorate what had happened to them a couple of years before. We're not talking about a long period of time afterwards. So basically, in the following years, they instituted a commemoration, or they instituted a day of feasting and happiness to commemorate the fact that they defeated their enemies a couple of years before. Okay, and what did they do on this day? Well, it says it's a day of simcha, of rejoicing, mishteh, feasting. Okay, v'yom tov, literally a good day, a holiday, basically, right? I think what that would imply is just a kind of a day off, a day of celebration, a day of not working and focusing on the holiday. Mishloch banot ish le'reu, and setting of gifts, each person to himself. So that's what the Jews there started doing. Now, notice what is missing. We don't have setting gifts to the poor, which we'll get to afterwards. Okay, and we certainly don't have anything about getting drunk. We certainly don't have anything about wearing costumes, okay? And we certainly don't have anything about some kind of official holiday being instituted. What this seems to be saying is just that the Jews each year, right? Let's say, I don't know, you want to remember something in your life, like your anniversary to your wife. Each year you have an anniversary party, something like that, okay? So the Jews in the provinces just started the 14th of each year. They just started celebrating it as a commemoration to what it had a couple years previous, okay? No official holiday yet. Verse 20. ויכתוב מרדכי את הדברים האלה, וישלח ספרים אל כל היהודים אשר בכל מדינות המלך אחשוורוש, הקרובים והרחוקים. So Mordechai wrote the following words and sent letters to El Kol Yehudim, to all the Jews asher b'chol medinot hamelech, throughout all of the provinces of King Achashverosh, krovim v'rechokim, near and far. Okay, so now Mordechai sends out an official letter. Okay, and remember, Mordechai by this point is second in command to Achashverosh, just as Joseph was second in command to Pharaoh. So when he sends something out, official letter, right? It has the force of being an official letter of the kingdom. Okay, so what does he send out? לקיים עליהם לראות עושים את יום 14 לחודש אדר ואת יום 15 בואו בכל שנה ושנה. That they should take on themselves, they should agree, they should accept upon themselves to celebrate the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the month of Adar, b'chol shana v'shana, each and every year. So it's really Mordechai here, we see, who institutes the holiday of Purim as an official holiday. Up until then, the only mention we don't even have mention of the Jews in Shushan celebrating on the 15th day each year. Maybe they did. Maybe we can imply it from the fact that those in the provinces did it on the 14th. But the only thing we have up into here is that the Jews, after that initial resting on the 14th day, the Jews out in the provinces, after that initial resting on the 14th day, they started on their own to celebrate each year, right, as a memorial to what had just happened to them recently. Okay, so, but it's not a holiday at this point. Now Mordechai turns it into an official, shall we say, holiday. Okay, Mordechai gives it the force of his office, as second in command to Pharaoh, to make it an official holiday, and that it should be kept each year. Okay, where was that? B'chol shana v'shana. Okay, and how does he do this? L'kayem aleim, that they should accept upon themselves. Basically, he's asking them to agree, or in a certain sense, to take an oath, even though it doesn't officially say take an oath to Yahweh. It's not on the level of an oath, but it's basically on the level of a promise. And we will see, we'll get an idea at the end of this chapter exactly what that means. Okay, but here we have the first inkling of an institution of Purim as an official holiday, and it's done by Mordechai. Okay, verse 22. כי ימים אשר נחו בהם היהודים מאויביהם בחודש, אשר נהפך להם מיגון לשמחה, מעבר ליום טוב, לעשות אותם ימי משתה ושמחה, ולשלוח מנות איש לרעהו ומתנות לאביונים. Okay, so now here we have the details of this holiday that Mordecai is asking them in this official letter that he sent all of the provinces, the Jews all around the empire, all around the kingdom. He sends out this official letter, and what does he say? He says they should celebrate the 14th day and the 15th day each year, each and every year. And what are the details of what he would like them to do? Well, it's essentially what they'd already started doing. And they should celebrate them as memorial to the fact that the Jews rested from their enemies, and to memorialize or to commemorate this month in which Ne'afach lehem, and here we have again the Nahafoch-Hu. Okay, remember we saw in chapter 10. I'll open it up here. Esther 10. Where was it? I'm sorry, it was in chapter 9. It's in chapter 10. No, it's in chapter 9. My mistake. So up at the beginning of chapter 9, right? We have here it is. Chapter 9, verse 1. We have that Nahafoch-Hu. Okay? The idea that this holiday is really celebrating that everything was turned upside down on its head. The Jews were supposed to be attacked, and instead they were the ones who attacked and destroyed their enemies. Okay, Haman was supposed to be number one, or was the highest official to King Ahasuerus, and his enemy Mordecai became the highest official to King Ahasuerus, etc. So everything is turned on its head, and that's encapsulated by this phrase Nahafoch-Hu. Every Jew knows this phrase Nahafoch-Hu because it's always mentioned with connection to Purim. So that's like the famous phrase of Purim. And here we have it again mentioned. Where were we? Here, Ne'afach lehem. It's the same idea. Nahafoch-Hu, Ne'afach lehem. That was turned upside down for them. Mi'agon simcha. So this month became a month of agony, turned into happiness. Me'ever Yom Tov, a month should have been a month of mourning, or what would have been should have been a month of mourning, turned into a good day, or good days. Lasotatam yemei mishteh, and this is now what he wants them to do. Okay, so to commemorate this Nahafoch-Hu, this turning upside down, this turning on the head of what was supposed to be, what actually happened. Okay, and now this is what he institutes in that first letter. We can call this the letter of Mordecai because there'll be a second letter sent out, which we'll call the letter of Esther. Okay, but this is the letter of Mordecai, who again is second in command to King Ahasuerus. And now he says in this letter exactly what the Jews throughout the generations, b'chol shana v'shana, each and every year, to take upon themselves, l'kayem alehem, should take upon themselves to do. Okay, lasotatam yemei mishteh. Okay, to celebrate them as days of feasting, v'simcha, and rejoicing, umishloch manot ish le'reu, and sending gifts, each person to his neighbor, to his fellow man, and matanot evyonim, and giving gifts to the poor. Okay, so what did the Jews start to do? So the only thing we see beforehand, I shouldn't say the only thing, but what we see beforehand is that the Jews out in the provinces each year on the 14th had begun already to decide. They decided on their own to commemorate this 14th day when they rested. They fought on the 13th, rested on the 14th, and they commemorated each year by doing what? Where was it? To make it a day of rejoicing, feasting, a happy day or a good day, and to celebrate and to send gifts each person to his fellow man. So here we have mishteh v'simcha, okay, feasting and rejoicing. Same here. Here we have mishloch manot ish le'rehu, each person sending gifts to his fellow man, which is exactly what it says here. And now Mordecai adds on, or the letter adds on, also they should send gifts to the poor. Well, it's very similar to sending gifts to your fellow man, but it does explicitly say also gifts should be given to the poor. It's a day where gifts are given to the poor. Okay? Just as God had mercy on the Jews, now we should celebrate by remembering the poor in the community as well, is the idea here. Okay, so what's added on here? What's added on here is this matanot le'evyonim, and that's encapsulated, or that's made official in this first letter that Mordechai sends out to the Jews all around the provinces. Okay, let's move on. And he asks them to accept this upon themselves. Okay, and the Jews respond. And this is very interesting. So the Jews accepted upon themselves, they accepted upon themselves that which they had already begun to do, and that which Mordechai wrote to them. Okay? So they'd already started to do it, and now Mordechai writes and officially requests that they continue to do this throughout from year to year. In other words, that they turn this into an official holiday. Okay? And the Jews accept this. And that's what Mordechai asked for right here. He asked them to L'kayem alehem, the otosim, blah, blah, blah. Okay? He asked them to accept upon themselves that they're going to keep this day of celebration from year to year. And here we get the response. The Jews say, yes, we'll keep they accept upon themselves that which they had already begun to do, and now which Mordechai officially requests that they do from year to year. So this is it. This is the institution. This is the way that the holiday of Purim was instituted. The Jews had already started to celebrate the 14th. The Jews in the provinces had already started to celebrate the 14th day of Adar as a holiday, as a day of celebration. Mordechai then says, okay, this is a great idea. I want to make this official, that the Jews every year, each and every year, will keep this holiday. And he writes a letter to them asking them to officially accept this upon themselves, And then the Jews respond, the representatives of the Jews from all the provinces or around the entire kingdom respond, and they accept upon themselves. And that's the way the holiday of Purim was initially instituted. Okay, right there. It came from what the Jews were already doing, and then he had a letter, an official letter, asking them to accept to do this every single year, to continue to do this every single year. Okay, verse 24, Ki Haman ben Hatah Agayi Tzorei kol hayudim, and then we just get a little bit of the story behind it, which you already know. Ki Haman Hamadata ben Hamadata. So I won't even translate here. Agagi Tzorei kol hayudim chashav al hayudim le'adam u'yipir hu ra lehumam u'le'abdam. Okay, so you can follow along there in the English. Verse 25. ובבואה לפני המלך אמר אם הספר ישוב מחשבתו הרעה אשר חשב על היהודים על ראשו ותלו אותו ואת בניו על העץ. And I just want to see one thing here. One second, please. Second. One second. Okay, let's go on. Verse 26. על כן, קראו ימים האלה פורים. So now we get the reasoning for the name, okay, or the official name that is given to this holiday. על כן, קראו לימים האלה פורים. So they call this holiday Purim, על שם הפור, based on the name of the Pur. So Pur is a Persian word. Okay, al ken, and we have an explanation. We have explicitly here what Pur means in the previous verse. Okay, okay. So Haman, he cast that lot to determine when on what day he would destroy the Jews, and the word for lot in Persian is Pur, and then we have an explanation of what the word means in Hebrew. Goral. Goral it's basically a lot. We see this word many times throughout the Tanakh. For instance, for the distribution of lands, a goral, a lot is chosen, or a lot is cast, and that's exactly what Haman did to determine when he was going to destroy the Jews, and that's why the holiday is called Purim, as we know. Okay. Again, karu liyamim ha'era Purim al shema apur al ken. הכל דברי האיגרת הזאת ומה ראו על ככה ומה הגיע אליהם. So this is speaking about the letter that Mordecai sent out. Let me just go back here for 1 second. Okay, so this is basically from here to here. So this is explaining that in the letter of Mordecai, okay, that this is explaining that in the letter that Mordecai sent out, he's explaining why the holiday should be Purim, okay? And it says here, "Kol divrei ha'igeret hazot," okay, according to all the words of this letter. And this letter is referring to that same letter that Mordecai had sent out. So this basically these verses are saying that in the letter included the name of the holiday and why it was called that. Okay. Verse 27, "Kimu v'kiblu hayudim aleim azaram v'kol hanilwim alehem v'lo ya'avor li'ot osim et shnei hayamim ha'ele kekatvam ukizmanam b'chol shana v'shana." Let me just see one thing here for myself. Okay, verse 27. So here we have again stating that the Kiblu, the Jews agreed and accepted upon themselves and upon their seed, upon their descendants, and upon all of those who joined them, okay, which would probably imply the Gerim, that it should never ever be canceled. That they should keep these 2 days, as it is written, according to times of Shana Shana. So this is basically what the Jews accepted. So basically the Jews took, I wouldn't call it an oath, but they took a solemn promise. It doesn't say they actually took an oath to Yahweh, but they took a solemn promise that they would do this, not just for themselves, but also for their descendants throughout all of their generations. For the seed, all of the Gerim that joined to them, that it should never ever be canceled, it should never ever be transgressed. That they should be keeping these 2 days, okay, as it is written and in the correct times, okay, as it is written and in the correct times each and every year. And that's the way the holiday was accepted. Okay, so the Jews took it upon themselves for themselves and throughout all of their generations, they took it upon themselves to keep this holiday. And it says, as it was written. Okay, so what is as it was written? We saw it should be a day of feasting, rejoicing, sending gifts to each other, and sending gifts to the poor. And also in its correct time. So we spoke earlier about what the correct time of Purim is. And we saw that really the only thing that makes sense in a biblical calendar is it would not be in the 13th month Adar Bet, but it would have to be in the 12th month. Okay, it would have to be on the 14th and 15th of the 12th month. The simple reason that in a biblical calendar, we don't know whether there's going to be a 13th month, or we usually don't know whether there's going to be a 13th month. We might know if there's going to be if there's not going to be a 13th month, if we already found the Viv, but if we haven't found the Viv, we don't know with certainty whether there's going to be a 13th month or not. Therefore, using the biblical calendar, there's no way that we could keep the holiday on the 13th month. With the fixed calendar, the Hillel, the second calendar of the rabbis, then they might have the luxury to keep it on the 13th month. But if we were to take this at its word here and take into account the way the biblical calendar works, then Kizmanam, and it seems to be very important that Mordecai here says that they keep it at the right times, okay? That this would imply that we should be keeping Purim not in the 13th month, but so really Karaite Purim was a month ago, Again, I explained at the beginning of the talk, why am I doing it today? Because most of the Jewish world is celebrating Purim yesterday and today, and so to stay in line with them, I'm doing the talk today. But that doesn't mean I'm celebrating Purim today. I celebrated Purim a month ago. Okay, verse 28. בימים האלה נזכרים ונעשים בכל דור ודור, משפחה ומשפחה, מדינה ומדינה, ועיר ועיר, וימי הפורים האלה לא יעברו מתוך היהודים, וזכרם לא יסוף מזרם. So again, this is saying here, I'll just translate it. And these days are remembered and done and kept in each and every generation. Mishpacha u'mishpacha, each and every family, medina u'medina, each and every province, va'ir va'ir, each and every city, v'imei ha'purim ha'eleh, and these days of the Purim, lo ya'avru toch hayudim, should not be transgressed from among, or should not be forgotten, shall we say, from among the Jews. V'zichram lo yasuf mizaram, and their memory should not disappear, should not perish from their seed, from their descendants. Okay, so this is again what Mordecai wanted, or what the institution of the holiday instructed. Okay, that it should be kept and never forgotten each year, from year to year, on its right time, at its right time, on the 14th and 15th day of the 12th month, and it should never be forgotten. It should never be not kept, no matter where you are. Okay, Medina or Medina. And now you could make a claim, but I'm not going to get into it here. This means for all the Jews just in Persia, that outside of Persia, the Jews don't have to keep this holiday. That this was basically just instituted for the Jews of Persia, and I think that could very well be a valid claim. But hey, nothing wrong with keeping the holiday. That's number one for sure. It's a great holiday. Okay, and number two, it certainly would, from the Jews of Persia, and that's where a lot of the Jews were at that time, it certainly would percolate out into the general Jewish population, even they weren't in Persia. Most of the Jews, again, were at some way or another in the Persian Empire. I mean, the vast majority, whether they were back in the land of Israel or whether they were throughout the Persian Empire, they were in the Persian Empire. So this would really encompass just about all of the Jews, and at that point, and so it should be kept from year to year. Okay, but again, technically speaking, one could claim that this holiday was really instituted only for the Jews of Persia. But again, I don't know what percentage that would include at that point. The vast majority of all of the Jews. Maybe there was some in Egypt at that point. Maybe there was some scattered, God knows where, but almost all Jews were within the Persian Empire, which at that point also included the land of Israel. Okay. So now we have a second letter. So that was the first letter. Okay, so the Jews started keeping the holiday on their own. Mordecai writes an official letter, a very forceful letter, basically saying that they must accept, that he's asking them to accept this holiday from year to year and keep it and never forget it and do it in its right time and do it in its right manner. And then the Jews accept, and then the Jews take upon themselves, they agree to do this. Okay, now we have a second letter that's sent out, and we'll call this the letter of Esther. Verse 29. ותכתוב אסתר המלכה בת אביחיל ומרדכי היהודי את כל תוקף לקיים את איגרת הפורים הזאת השני. Okay? So what this says here is Esther wrote, Esther the queen, the daughter of Avichail, Esther the daughter of Avichail, the queen, wrote, along with Mordecai the Jew, at kol tokef, using all of their official power, okay, the kayemet to get it to Purim azot shenit, okay, to keep this, or to accept, to uphold this second letter of Purim. So now there's a second letter that's sent out, written by Esther. Okay, now Mordecai co-signs on the letter. Why? Because Esther was the queen. The queen was not an official position in the sense of it was not a ruling. It was not she was not one of the officers of the officials of the king. She was the queen. She was his wife, right? And she was a woman. So in order to give it more force, it would have to be co-signed by a man, and it would have to be co-signed. And in this case, it was co-signed by Mordecai, who once again was second in command. But this letter is really coming from Queen Esther. who obviously by this point was very beloved by clearly Achashverosh, her king, her husband loved her, and therefore probably she was very well loved throughout all of Persia. And of course, she was very, very beloved to the Jews for what she had done to save them. And so she's sending out this second letter. So the first letter comes from Mordechai. The second letter comes from Esther, co-signed by Mordechai, and it reinforces the first letter. So now it's getting the force, not just of Mordechai, who is the second in command, who's basically the leader of the Jews at this point, okay, and second in command to Achashverosh, but now it's coming from Queen Esther, who's beloved. It would be like, I hate to use Obama as an example because I can't stand the guy, but it would be like Obama sending out a letter saying, do such and such, okay? And then, Shalom Ovadia, I don't know if we were able to hear beforehand. And then, Obama sending out a letter saying, I don't know, riot or something like that. And then Michelle Obama, who doesn't have an official position within the administration, but who is loved for some strange reason by many people, sending out a letter saying, yes, you should go out and riot and rip down police stations and stuff like that, right? That's kind of what's going on here. So first is the official letter sent out by Mordechai, who has an official position within the kingdom, and now here's his adopted daughter and Achashverosh's wife, the queen, sending out a letter by the beloved Esther, basically, reinforcing this and kind of, using her pull and her popularity with all of the Jews to reinforce what Mordechai had already sent out as an official decree. So this is the second letter. This is the letter of Esther. V'yichtov Esther Nahafoch-Hu bat Avichail u'Mordechai Yehudi, and it's co-signed by Mordechai, as we said, for the reasons we said. Et kol tokef lekayem et geret haPurim hazot hasheni, using all of their official position, their official force, to uphold this second letter of Purim. Okay, verse 30. וישלח ספרים כל היהודים אל 27 מהמדינות מלכות אחשוורוש. So they sent scrolls or letters to all the Jews throughout the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Achashverosh. Divrei shalom ve'emet, words of peace and truth. And what words of peace and truth? The Qara'im et yemei Purim, to uphold these days of Purim, bismanam, in their time, which again, we imply that given the biblical calendar must mean the 14th and 15th day of the 12th month, not the 13th month. In other words, if there's an Adar Aleph and an Adar Bet, or an Adar and an Adar Bet, it should be kept in Adar, not in Adar Bet. That would be the correct time. Kasher kiyem kiyam aleim Mordechai Yehudi, as Mordechai the Jew had kiyam, that's the PL form, as he had caused to uphold upon them. In other words, in that which he had forced them to uphold or implored them to uphold, had them agree to uphold. But Esther Malka and Queen Esther, because Kimu al Nafsham, and that which they had accepted upon themselves to uphold, the Al Zaram, and for the descendants, upon themselves and for the descendants, Divrei Atzomot ve'Za'akam. And let me explain what this means. As they accepted upon themselves and upon their descendants, the words of the issues of the fast and the crying out to God. And I'll explain what this means in 1 second. Okay. But I want to go back to this verse and pick it apart again. So it's the first part of the verse. Okay, so the second letter says that they should once again, it reinforces the idea that they should once again take it upon themselves to keep these days of the Purim in their correct times. Okay, now it gives, and now it explains further exactly what status this holiday of Purim has, or what force this holiday of Purim has. So as Mordechai, the Jew, and Esther, the queen, had, I wouldn't say coerced, but had them agree to uphold. Okay, so first of all, the first it has is that Mordecai, the Jew, and Esther, the queen, had both implored them, or both, had agreed to keep this holiday, and that's referring to that first letter, the letter of Mordecai, and now the second letter, the letter of Esther. That's what that's referring to. But then we have another piece of information, which is here, Vasher Himu al Nafsham. 1 second, please. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so v'kasher kiyamu al nafsham ve'al zera'am, just as they had accepted upon themselves and upon their descendants, divrei tzomot v'za'akatam, the days of fasting, and they're crying out. They're crying out to God is the indication. So what does this mean? Okay, this means that this has the force of an official fast day. Okay, it's not a holiday from the Tanakh. It's not a holiday from God. Okay, such as Yom Kippurim is, or such as Shavuot or the other holidays. This is a holiday that has the same level of force, or it's being nimshal. It's being compared to a holiday with this that has the same level of force as the fast days. Okay, so just as the Jews took upon themselves each year to keep the fast days, so now, Mordecai and Esther are asking them, or telling them, that this should have the same level, or that basically the Book of Esther is saying that this should have the same force, instead of the same status as one of the fast days. So what does that mean, one of the fast days? Okay, well, in order to understand what that means, let's find it in the Book of Zechariah. Yeah, there it is. Oops. So go to Zechariah chapter 8, verse 19. Where does Zechariah go? There we go. Zechariah chapter 8, verse 19. Okay, so we'll start here in verse 18. Wahi devar Yahweh tzvaot elai lemor. So the word of Yahweh of hosts was upon me, saying, Komar Yahweh tzvaot, tzom revi'i v'tzom chamishi v'tzom shvi'i v'tzom asiri yeh lebeit Yehuda l'sason l'simcha u'lemodim tovim v'ha'emet v'shalom ehavu. Okay, so says Yahweh of hosts, the fast of the 4th, and the fast of the 5th, and the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th, yeah, the Beit Yehuda will be in future times to the house of Judah, L'sasoni simcha, for rejoicing and happiness, l'moadim tovim, the good times, it's like a Yom Tov, v'amet v'shalom eavu, and and they love, or they will love, truth, when they will love truth and peace. Okay, so this is now speaking about fast days that were instituted, and they're mentioned other places in the Tanakh. We have the fast of the 4th, which means the fast of the 4th month, the fast of the 5th month, the fast of the 7th month, and the fast of the 10th month. Okay, so what are these different fasts? These are all fast days that were instituted to commemorate certain events that took place within the history. So, for instance, the fast of the Hamishi, Tzom Hamishi, this is referring to what we would call today Tisha B'Av. Okay, the 5th month is Av. Okay, and this is commemorating. This is the fast to commemorate the destruction of the temple. Let's see if we can find where it's mentioned elsewhere. Let's see. 1 second here. It's too. One more shot. The fast of the fourth month. Okay, we can go here. So here we have, and of course, this is rabbinical point of view. The fast of the 14th month is the 17th of Tammuz. The fast of the 5th month is the 9th of Av. Fast of the 7th month is Tzom Gedalia. Fast of the 10th month is Asar B'Tevet. Okay, so let's talk about some of these fasts very briefly. We can find them in the end of the book of Jeremiah. And I'll just read through this in English to make it go quickly because I want to continue on with Esther. So we have some information about how Jerusalem fell in the last chapter of the book of Jeremiah. So Zedekiah, that was one of the last kings of Judah. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, okay? So the 10th month is Tevet, the 10th day of the 10th month. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. So this is the fast of the 10th month. And again, if we go back to Zechariah, okay, Zechariah 8:18 mentions the fast of the 10th month. That's month Adiri. Okay, so what happened on the 10th day of the 10th month? Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. They encamped outside the city and built siege works around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. So this is basically when the Babylonian army arrives at Jerusalem. That's the 10th day of the 10th month, also known as Asar B'Tevet. Okay. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled. So this is the 9th day of the 4th month. That's what we're speaking about here with, where is it? Okay. This is the 17th of Tammuz. One second here. Okay, close enough. I'll have to look it up later. But this is the 9th day of the 4th month. Okay, so this is when the wall of the city was broken through. I'm not sure why. I think the rabbis changed it to 17th. I'll have to look it up again, but it doesn't matter. Okay. So the city wall was broken through, according to Jeremiah 52:6, on the 9th day of the 4th month. So that's the fast of the 4th month. Okay, let's continue on a little bit. They left the city at night. So now Tzidkiyahu and his entire army flee. They flee the city of Jerusalem. They left the city at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden. Though the Babylonians were surrounding the city, they fled toward the Arava, but the Babylonian army pursued King Zedekiah and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. Soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured. And then we know what happens to Zedekiah. He was taken to the king of Babylon at Rivlah in the land of Hamath, where he pronounced sentence on him. There at Riblah, the king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He also killed all the officials of Judah. Then he put out Zedekiah's eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon, where he put him in prison till the day of his death. On the 10th day of the 5th month, okay, and now we're talking about Tisha B'Av, except what we see very interestingly here, okay, so that's Tisha B'Av, that's the 10th day, the 9th day of Av, okay, but Jeremiah doesn't mention a 9th day of Av, it mentions a 10th day of Av, and the rabbis actually changed it from the 9th day of Av to the 10th day of, from the 10th day of Av to the 9th day of Av, for reasons we won't get into right here. On the 10th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard who served the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of Yahweh, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the command of the imperial guard, broke down all the walls around Jerusalem, etc. Okay, so this is the day that the temple was burnt down, not on the 9th day of the 5th month, but on the 10th day of the 5th month. Okay, so these are the fast days that Zechariah is speaking about. Seventh one we won't get into right now, but the fourth month, the fast of the fourth month, that's when the Babylonian army encamps around Jerusalem. The fast of the fifth month, that's when the walls of Babylon were breached. And then the fast of the, I'm sorry, start at the beginning, the fast of the 10th month, I said it wrong. The fast of the 10th month, that's when the Babylonian army showed up around Jerusalem. The fast of the fourth month, that's when the wall was breached. And then, of course, we have what the rabbis call Tisha B'Av, but it's actually the Asiri B'Av, the 10th of the fast of the fifth month. That's when basically Jerusalem was burnt to the ground, including the temple of Yahweh. Okay, so these fast days are now taken upon Israel each year. They keep them and celebrate them throughout the generations. And that is what in verse 23, that's what I'm sorry, not verse 23, in Esther 9, verse 31, that is what the verse is referring to when it says that Purim should be kept just like those fast days are kept. Okay, so it's not something that God told us to do, but the Jews basically, in order to commemorate these horrible things that happened to them, okay, leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, they fast each year, and they're supposed to do it each and every year. Okay, and that's what Purim is supposed to be. Purim is supposed to have the same status. We're supposed to have the same tokef, the same level of force as do these fast days, and that's exactly what verse 31 is telling us. Okay, so that gives us an idea of how we're supposed to relate to Purim. Okay, it's like one of the official fast days that are kept from year to year. Okay, that are not biblical holidays. In other words, they're not holidays that are ordained by Yahweh, but they are meant to be kept. Okay. I won't say tradition, and I won't say an oath. Somewhere in between tradition and an oath, they're kind of like instituted communal days that that all of the Jews are expected to keep throughout the generations, and that's exactly what the Purim is. Okay. And the words or the statements of Esther, upheld the words of these words of the Purim, and it was written in a book. In other words, these ideas here were written somewhere and stored officially as a book. Okay, so that's it. That's Esther chapter 9, and through Esther chapter 9, we get an idea of exactly what happened. Okay, how the Jews fought against their enemies, and then we get the specific details of how Purim became a holiday, how it started just as a spontaneous commemoration from year to year of the Jews' victory over their enemies on the 14th of the 12th month, and then how Mordechai wrote an official letter, as using his official position as second in command to Ahasuerus, instituting Purim, and then how Esther wrote a second letter upholding that as queen and as her position as being beloved throughout all the empire, to reinforce Mordechai's letter and explaining, and then these last verses explain that this holiday is to be understood or is to be accepted just as the fast days that are mentioned in the book of Zechariah, and that we gave the reasons behind them in the last chapter of Jeremiah, how they are kept. Okay, they're not biblical holidays, they're not instituted, and they're not ordained by Yahweh, but they're basically, I balk on using the word tradition because it's such a loaded word when it comes to the rabbis, because then they'll say, oh, that's the same as keep head. It's not a tradition. It's more than tradition. It's something that the entire Jewish people solemnly promise, and I won't swear because there's no implication here of any kind of official oath to Yahweh, but they solemnly promise to keep from year to year for themselves and their descendants after them, and those things that they promise for themselves should never be broken. So that's what Purim is. It's like one of the fast days. Okay, one of the official fast days. And with that, we get to the end of Esther chapter 9. And this is really an important chapter. And again, one that's often glossed over, that's often brushed over, often ignored, because no one really, it's not narrative. It's kind of like, as we've been studying the Torah from week to week, the Torah study, I always talk about Torah flyover country, like the details of the building of the Mishkan or the details of the sacrificial service. Nobody really pays attention to that. And if you go to synagogues, literally, you'll see people sleeping. Sometimes the rabbi will fall asleep if someone is reading the Torah during these verses. And but they're extremely important, right? Maybe they're not as fun as as a story about a golden calf or something like that, but they're extremely important. And it's the same thing here. Here we get the intricate details of how Purim became a holiday, how it started as just a spontaneous tradition or a spontaneous, again, I don't want to use the word tradition, as a spontaneous celebration from year to year, some spontaneous commemoration, and then how Mordecai wrote a letter instituting it initially as a holiday, and now how Esther wrote a second letter using her position as queen and her position of being loved by all to reinforce that which Mordecai had said. So it's kind of like the yin and the yang. Here's an official letter from Mordecai, right? It's kind of like the dvash and the oketz. This the honey and the sting. So here's I won't say sting exactly, but here's Mordecai writing an official letter, basically, compelling the Jews, or again, compelling is too strong a word, basically requesting that the Jews, or imploring the Jews officially uphold the holiday. And then we have so that's the oketz, and now we have the dvash, and the beloved King Esther writes a second letter, saying, yeah, we really should all be keeping this holiday, or really all going to be keeping this holiday. And that's the way the holiday was instituted, and it has the same konk, it has the same level of force as do the fast days that are mentioned in the book of Zechariah. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of Esther chapter 9. Any questions? Any comments? We'll go on a little bit longer. I definitely want to end within the next half an hour or so, for sure. Wherever we are in the next half an hour, that's going to be the end of it. But any questions on the establishment of Purim as a holiday? Okay, if not, let's go on. Or let's go backwards. Now we're in Esther chapter 8. And this I'm going to really kind of go through quickly as best I can. Okay, because I want to get as far as we can backwards. Okay, so in chapter 9, where were we in the beginning of chapter 9? That's speaking about the actual fighting that the Jews did in Shushan, the capital, and in the provinces. And now we go back a chapter. Okay. If I really want to go backwards, maybe I would just do it, paragraph by paragraph. I would look for each of these Masoretic chapters, I would say. But we won't go to that detail. Maybe next year. Okay, so we're in Esther chapter 8, verse 1. And I'm pretty much just going to read through now as much as I can. And follow along in your own translation. Tana melech Achashverosh le'Esther Malka et Beit An Zorer HaYudim Mordechai ba lifnei HaMelech ki higida Esther ma hu la. ויסר המלך את טבעתו אשר העביר מהמן ויתנה למרדכי ותשם אסתר את מרדכי על בית המן. So Mordecai is placed in control over the house of Haman, right? Now Mordecai is going to do whatever he wants to Haman, and we see what he does, right? תוסף אסתר ותדבר לפני המלך ותיפול לפני רגליו ותבך ותתחנן לו להעביר את רעת המן האגגי ואת מחשבתו אשר חשב על היהודים. So now Esther is basically going to beg for the Jews. Okay. Verse 4. וישת המלך לאסתר את שרביט הזהב ותקם אסתר ותעמוד לפני המלך. So Esther gets up. She was begging at his feet. Now she gets up. ותאמר אם על המלך טוב, ואם מצאתי חן לפניו, וכשר הדבר לפני המלך, and by the way, this is where we get the word kasher. It's the only place that it appears in the entire Tanakh, right here. Esther 8:5, and that's where you get the word kosher from. וכשר הדבר לפני המלך, וטובה אני בעיניו, ייכתב להשיב את הספרים מחשבת המן בן המדתה הראשי אשר כתב לעבד את היהודים אשר בכל מדינות המלך. כי איכך אוכל וראיתי ברעה אשר ימסע את עמי, ואיכך אוכל וראיתי באובדן מולדתי. So basically, Esther is begging Ahasuerus to rescind the decree that he had agreed to under the influence of Haman to have a day where everyone could gather and kill the Jews. And Ahasuerus responds, ויאמר המלך אחשוורוש לאסתר המלכה ולמרדכי היהודי, הנה בית המן נתתי לאסתר, ואותו תלו על העץ, על אשר שלח ידו ביהודים. Follow along again in the English. ואתם כתבו על היהודים כתוב בעיניכם בשם המלך, וחיתמו בטבעת המלך, כי כתב אשר נכתב בשם המלך, ונחתום בטבעת המלך אין להשיב. So we have here Ahasuerus' response. And his response is, listen, I cannot rescind the decree because according to the law of Madian Paras, Median Paras, once a decree is made, it can, even by the king, it cannot be rescinded. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow you to write another decree in my name, and you can emboss it with the official signet ring of the king, okay, whatever you want. So I cannot cancel the decree. That's not allowed, okay? But what you can do is write another one, and that's exactly what happens. So the reason you could say is that the Jews ended up defending themselves from Persia is because that initial decree couldn't be rescinded. Esther really wants the initial decree that had been written and signed by the king, that Haman and his armies and his people could attack the Jews. She wanted that rescinded, and Ahasuerus says, no, I'm not allowed to, according to the laws of Median Paras. Once the law is made, even and signed by the king, it cannot be rescinded. But you can write a new law saying that you can defend yourselves. But by the way, we have reference this very thing outside of the book of Esther, and that's in the book of Daniel. Oops. If I could find it very briefly. Oh, my battery's about to go out. I have to plug in. All right, let me close some of these off here. This can be closed. This can be closed. This can be closed. This can be closed. So let's see how I can do this. I can do this. Let's do it this way. Esther. Where is it? One second. No, it's like that. I have to go third dot. Oh, geez. All right, if I can't find it, we'll get it. That. There it is, Daniel 6:8. So Daniel chapter 6, verse 8, we see that Daniel, who lived under the Babylonians and then under the Persians, okay? So here, and this is speaking about when Daniel is basically he's caught praying. So, well, we won't get the whole story right now, but Daniel's caught praying 3 times a day, and then eventually he's thrown into the lion's den. That's the famous Daniel in the lion's den. Okay, and here I'm just going to verse. This is in Aramaic. Okay, so ke'an malkatakim, as a king, as the king establishes, asra, asra v'tirshum ketava, and it is written down in writing, is jotted down in writing. Di lo lehashnaya, that it is asur, asara, it is forbidden to change it, kidat madai oparas, according to the laws of Media and Persia. Lo ta'ader. Okay, that it should not be altered. Okay, so this here we have in Daniel chapter 6, verse 8. We have an external reference. Okay, outside of the Book of Esther, we have a reference to the idea that once a law, that it was a law in Media and Paras, that once a decree of the king was made, that it could not be changed, and that's exactly why in Esther chapter 8, Ahasuerus responds to Esther, listen, honey, I wish I could cancel the decree, but according to the laws of Media and Paras, once a decree is written by the king, it cannot be canceled. So the best I could do is allow you to make a new decree, and so that's what Esther and Mordecai do. They make a new decree, which is that they'll be able to defend themselves on that day, rather than the initial request that Esther had, which was that the original decree be canceled. Okay. And I have to plug in. So just give me a minute. I'm going to get my plug and I'm going to plug in. Be right back. Okay, I'm back and plugged in. So let's go on. Verse 9. ויקראו סופרי המלך בעת ההיא בחודש השלישי הוא חודש סיוון 23 בו ייכתב ככל אשר ציווה מרדכי אל היהודים ואל החרשדרבנים והפחות ושרי המדינות אשר מהודו ועד כוש 27 ומאה מדינה ומדינה 27 מדינה ומדינה כי כתבה בעם ועם כלשונו ואל היהודים כי כתבם וכלשונם, which is very interesting. That's a whole idea in it of itself. But you don't have to get into it. יכתוב בשם המלך אחשוורוש ויחתום בתאוות המלך וישלח ספרים ביד הרצים בסוסים רוכבי הרכש האחשוורים בני הרמחים. Verse 11. אשר נתן המלך ליהודים אשר בכל עיר ועיר להיקהל ולעמוד על נפשם, להשמיד, ולהרוג ולאבד את כל חיל עם ומדינה, שרים אותם טף ונשים, כלם לבוז. So what's very interesting is that according to the decree, they were allowed to take, oh, there's so much to say, but again, we got to rush through, unfortunately. They were allowed to take the shalal, the booty of war, but remember it says in chapter 9 that they didn't. ביום אחד בכל מדינות המלך אחשוורוש ב13 לחודש 12 הוא חודש אדר. So that's the day that's being decreed that the Jews can defend themselves. כאשר הכתב להינתן בת בכל מדינה ומדינה גלוי לכל העמים ולהיות היהודים עתידים ליום הזה להינקם מאויביהם. Verse 14. הרסים רוכבי הרכש האחשוורים יצאו מבוהלים ודחופים בדבר המלך והדלת ניתנה בשושן הבירה. ומרדכי יצא מלפני המלך בלבוש מלכות תכלת וחור ועטרת זהב גדולה ותחריף בוס לבן והעיר שושן סהלה ושמחה. 16, this is a famous verse. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר. 17. ובכל מדינה ומדינה, בכל עיר ועיר, מקום אשר דבר המלך ודתו מגיע שמחה וששון ליהודים, משתה ויום טוב, ורבים מעמי הארץ מתייחדים, כי נפל פחד היהודים עליהם. So this word מתייחדים is usually understood as converting, but it's definitely not, that is definitely not conclusive. Another explanation which I've seen floating around is that it means that Yahadim means came to the aid or supported the Jews. So that's Esther chapter 8. We'll go a little bit more. We'll go to Esther chapter 7. And again, in about 10 minutes, I'm going to stop. Okay, so this is chapter 7. We're working our way backwards. ויבוא המלך והמן לשתות עם אסתר מלכה, ויאמר המלך לאסתר, גם ביום השני, במשתה, היין, מה שאלתך אסתר המלכה, ותינתן לך, ומה בקשתך עד שיא המלכות ותעש. Verse 3. ותעד אסתר המלכה, ותראי מצאתי חן בעיניך המלך, ואם על המלך טוב, תינתן לי שי בשאלתי ועמי בבקשתי. Verse 4. וכי נמכרו אני ועמי להשמיד, להרוג ולאבד, ואילו לעבדים ולשפחות נמכרנו, החרשתי, כי אין הצר שועה בנזק המלך. Verse 5. Verse 5. ויאמר המלך אחשוורוש, ויאמר לאסתר מלכה, מי הוא זה? מי הוא זה? ואיזה? הוא אשר מלאו ליבו לעשות כן. ותאמר אסתר איש צר ואויב המן הרע הזה, והמן נבעט מלפני המלך במכה. So that's it. That's you could say right there is the climax of the whole story. Bo, can you get me some water, please? Sparkling. 1 second, please. Okay, let's go on. ותאמר אסתר איש צר ואויב המן הרע הזה, והמן נבעט מלפני המלך והמלכה. Okay. So Haman is hanged, and then we saw later on his 10 sons are hanged. והמלך קם בחמתו ממשתה היין אל גינת הביתון, והמן עמד לבקש על נפשו מאסתר המלכה, כי ראה כי גבתה אליו הרעה מאת המלך. Verse 8. והמלך שב מגינת הביתן אל בית משתה היין, והמן נופל על המיטה אשר אסתר עליה, ויאמר המלך הרם לכבוש את המלכה עמי בבית. הדבר יצא מפי המלך ופני המן חפו. ויאמר חרבונה אחד מן הסריסים לפני המלך, גם הנה העץ אשר עשה המן למרדכי אשר דיבר טוב על המלך עומד בבית המן גבוה 50 אמה. ויאמר המלך תלוהו עליו, ויתלו את המן על העץ אשר הכין למרדכי, וחמת המלך שכחה. Okay, we have 8 more minutes. Let's go back to chapter 6. בלילה ההוא נדדה שנת המלך, ויאמר להביא את ספר הזיכרונות דברי הימים, ויהיו נקראים לפני המלך. וימסה כתוב אשר אגיד מרדכי על בגדנה, ותרש שני סריסי המלך משומרי הסף אשר ביקשו לשלוח יד במלך אחשוורוש. Verse 3. Verse 3. ויאמר המלך מה נעשה עיקר וגדולה למרדכי על זה, ויאמרו נערי המלך משרתיו לו, נעשה עמו דבר. Verse 4. ויאמר המלך מי בחצר, וחמן בא לחצר בית המלך החיצונה לאמור למלך לתלות את מרדכי על העש אשר הכין לו. Verse 5. ויאמר נערי המלך אל הנה המן עומד בחצר. ויאמר המלך יבוא. ויבוא המן ויאמר לו המלך מה לעשות באיש אשר המלך חפץ ויקרו. ויאמר המן בליבו למי יחפוץ המלך לעשות יקר יותר ממני. So Haman thinks that party is for him. ויאמר המן אל המלך איש אשר המלך חפץ ויקרו. Verse 8. ויביאו לבוש מלכות אשר לבש בו המלך וסוס אשר רכב עליו המלך ואשר ניתן כתר מלכות בראשו. Verse 9. ונתן הלבוש והסוס על יד איש משרי המלך הפרטמים, and there we have another Persian word, והלבישו את האיש אשר המלך חפץ ויקרו והכבידוהו והרכיבוהו הסוס ברחוב העיר וקראו לפניו ככה יעשה לאיש אשר המלך חפץ ויקרו. Okay, so here's another Nahafoch-Hu. So Haman, thinking that it's speaking about him, recommends what's happened to him that the king wants to honor, and then Haman is told to do this to Mordechai. Reminds me of an episode of my favorite TV show of all times, The Honeymooners, where Ralph thinks he is going to be nominated as Raccoon of the Year, and he prepares a huge speech and he gets ready for the big day, and then it turns out that the speech he has to give is for his best friend Norton, who's been nominated as Raccoon of the Year. Anyway, if you're a Honeymooners fan, you'll see the similarity. Okay, verse 10. ויאמר המלך להמן מהר קח את הלבוש ואת הסוס כאשר דיברת ועשה כן למרדכי היהודי היושב בשער המלך אל תפל דבר מכל אשר דיברת. Verse 11. ייקח המן את הלבוש ואת הסוס וילבש את מרדכי וירכיבהו ברחוב העיר ויקרא לפניו ככה יעשה לאיש אשר המלך חפץ ויקרו. Verse 12. וישב מרדכי אל שער המלך המן נדחף אל ביתו אבל וחפוי ראש. One second. Okay, verse 13. ויספר המן לזרש אשתו ולכל אביו את כל אשר קראו ויאמרו לו חכמיו וזרש אשתו אם זרע היהודים מרדכי אשר הכילותה לנפול לפניו לא תוכל לו כי נפול ליפול לפניו. So basically his wise man and his wife, who's a lot wiser than him, says because Mordechai is a Jew, you're not going to be able to stand. Verse 14. עודם מדברים עמו וסריסי המלך הגיעו ויבחינו להביא את המן אל המשתה אשר עשתה אסתר. Okay, let's go back to chapter 5. Do one last one, I guess. ויהי ביום השלישי ותלבש אסתר מלכות ותעמוד בחצר בית המלך הפנימית נוכח בית המלך והמלך יושב על כיסא מלכותו בבית המלכות נוכח Petach Habayit. Verse 2. ויהי כראות המלך את אסתר המלכה עומדת בחצר נשאה חן בעיניו וישת המלך לאסתר את שרביט הזהב אשר בידו ותקרב אסתר ותגעה בראש השרביט. ויאמר לה המלך, מה לך אסתר המלכה, ומה בקשתך עד חצי המלכות ויינתן לך. Verse 4. ותאמר אסתר, אם על המלך טוב, יבוא המלך והמן היום אל המשתה אשר עשיתי לו. So Esther is very smart. She invites him to one banquet, and then at the banquet she invites him to a second banquet, right? She really, people think she's kind of building it up, but I think she's taking it slow, right? That's basically what she's doing. She doesn't want to hit him over the head, figuratively speaking, with a request right away. She wants to build up to something. Verse 5. ויאמר המלך, מהרו את המן עשות את דבר אסתר. ויבוא המלך והמן אל המשתה אשר עשתה אסתר. Verses 6 and 7. ויאמר המלך לאסתר, במשתה היין מה שאלתך ויינתן לך ומה בקשתך עד חצי המלכות ותעש. Verse 7. ותען אסתר ותאמר שאלתי ובקשתי. So here he invites him to another banquet. אם מצאתי חן בעיני המלך, ואם על המלך טוב לתת את שאלתי, לעשות את בקשתי, יבוא המלך והמן אל המשתה, אשר אעשה להם, מחר אעשה כדבר המלך. Second here. Okay, verse 9. ויצא המן ביום ההוא, שמח וטוב לב, כראות המן את מרדכי בשער המלך, ולא קם ולא זע ממנו, וימלא המן על מרדכי חיבה. ויתאפק המן, ויבוא אל ביתו, וישלח, ויעווה את אוהביו ואת זרש אשתו. זרש אשתו. ויספר להם המן את כבוד אשרו ורוב בניו, ואת כל אשר גידלו המלך, ואת אשר נישאו על השרים ועבדי המלך. So he's telling her about his promotion at work. Verse 12. ויאמר המן, אף לא הביאה אסתר המלכה עם המלך אל המשתה אשר עשתה, כי אם אותי וגם. Second. וגם למחר אני יקראו לה עם המלך. Verse 13. בכל זה איננו שווה לי בכל עת אשר אני רואה את מרדכי היהודי יושב בשער המלך. So everything that he's gotten is worth nothing to him as long as he sees Mordecai disrespecting him in the king's courtyard. Right? It's like someone who has $1 billion, but they can't get a certain girl or something like that, a certain woman, and their $1 billion is worth nothing to them because they can't get what they're not focusing on what they have, but on what they don't have. That's the type of personality we're talking about here with Haman. ותאמר לו זרש אשתו, בכל אוהביו יעשו אס, גבוה 50 אמה בבוקר, אמור למלך ויתלו את מרדכי עליו, ובוא עם המלך, אלא משתה שמח, ויטב הדבר לפני המן ויעש העץ. So they prepared a gallows for Mordecai. All right, we'll go a little over. Go back to verse 4, I mean to chapter 4. Verse 1. ומרדכי ידע את כל אשר נעשה, ויקרא מרדכי את בגדיו, וילבש שק ואפר, ויסב לתוך העיר, ויזעק זעקה גדולה ומרה. ויבוא עד לפני שער המלך, כי אין לבוא אל שער המלך בלבוש שק. ובכל מדינה ומדינה, מקום אשר דבר המלך ודתו מגיע, אבל גדול ליהודים וסום ובכי ומספד שק ואפר יצאה לרבים. תבואנה נערות אסתר וסריסיה ויגידו לה, ותית חלחל המלכה מאוד, ותשלה בגדים לביש את מרדכי, ולהסיר שקו מעליו ולא קיבל. 5. ותקרא אסתר להתך מסריסי המלך, אשר העמיד לפניה, ותצווהו על מרדכי לדעת מה זה ועל מה זה. Verse 6. ויצא התך אל מרדכי אל רחוב העיר אשר לפני שער המלך. 7. ויגד לו מרדכי את כל אשר קראו ואת פרשת הכסף אשר אמר המן לשקול על גנזי המלך ביהודים לאבם. Verse 8. ואת פתשגן כתב דעת אשר ניתן בשושן להשמידם נתן לו להראות את אסתר ולהגיד לה. הוא לסוות עליה לבוא אל המלך, להתחנן לו ולבקש מלפניו על עמה. By the way, when I read Torah, if you noticed, I try as best I can to get what is believed to be at least the Masoretic, the Tiberian Masoretic pronunciation as accurate as possible. And that's that's what I attempt to do. If I were to just read it in regular modern Hebrew, then I would just zip through it much more quickly. But I'm trying to get the pronunciation as accurate as possible. יבוא התך ויגד לאסתר את דברי מרדכי, ותאמר אסתר להתך ותצווהו אל מרדכי. Verse 11. כל עבדי המלך ועם מדינות המלך יודעים אשר כל איש ואישה אשר יבוא אל המלך אל החצר הפנימית אשר לא יקרא חת דתו להמית לבד מאשר יושיט לו המלך את שרביט הזהב וחיה, ואני לא נקראתי לבוא אל המלך זה 30 יום. One second. So Esther now says she can't go to the king because, right, this is no one's allowed to come to the inner courtyard of the king unless she has been called for. And the only exception is that if he comes, and then the Yishitlo Amelech et Sharvit Zahav. If the king stretches out or extends to that person his gold staff, his golden staff, right? Wayagidu leMordechai et divrei Esther, verse 13. Wayomer Mordechai la'ashiv el Esther al tidami benafshech lihimayet bet hamelech kol haYehudim. So don't think only you're going to survive if you don't do this. Ki'im harish taharishi ba'et hazoth rewach وحصلا يعمود ליהודים ממקום אחר, ואת בית אביך תאבדו, ומי יודע אם לעת כזאת הגעת למלכות. So if you stay quiet at this time, רווח והצלה יעמוד ליהודים ממקום אחר, relief and salvation will arise for the Jews from another place. ואת בית אביך תאבדו. Okay, in your father's house you shall perish. And who knows if it is not for this very purpose or for this very time, for this very season that you've become the queen. You've arrived at the queenship. Okay, so this is also a very key verse, right? So Mordechai says, "Listen, basically he's saying either way, if you don't go, we're all going to die. Don't think you're going to be saved just because you're the queen." Okay, so either way, you and your father's house are going to perish, but salvation will come from somewhere else if it's not from you. Honestly, I never understood the logic behind this, because if salvation does come from somewhere else, then that means that Esther and her family would survive. So, that's for another time. I think it would have been more compelling. Not that I intend to rewrite or have the arrogance to rewrite the narrative of the Book of Esther, but it would have been something like, I think it would have been more compelling to say, if you don't stand up and do this, then all the Jews are going to die, and you will die among them. All right. So either way, you're going to die. You might as well stand up and do it. I don't. By saying that salvation is going to come from somewhere else. Oh shoot! Thing froze up. Oh, darn it. Why does this happen? Okay, I think I ended here because it froze. No, I have to go back out and come back in. All right, I'll be back. Then we'll end it. All right, I'm going to end it here. So interesting, God. This book is so interesting. Book of Esther is really fascinating. What? Almost. I'm still broadcasting. Yes, I'll be done in about 5 minutes. What's going on here? All right, everyone. I'm back, as usually happens. Usually during the talk, for reasons I still can't figure out, it freezes up. But I think this is a good place to end. I said I was going to go for 2 hours. It's been almost 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes approximately, 2 hours and a half from when we actually started. So I think I'm going to end it here. Okay. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I encourage everyone to read the Book of Esther, not just the narrative parts, but also the last chapters, which are vitally important to understand how the holidays set up. I mean, the whole book is fascinating, but the last chapters, particularly chapter 9, really speaks about where we get this holiday from and helps us understand why, as Karaites, we keep this holiday. First of all, it is in the Tanakh. That's number one. And number two, it has the force of being accepted by all of the Jews, just like as we saw the fast holidays, the fast of the 4th, the 5th, the 7th, the 10th month. Okay? So it's not a biblical holiday. It's not in the sense of, it's not a holiday ordained by Yahweh, but it is a holiday that the Jews were, I won't say compelled, I'm trying to find the right word, were requested, somewhere between requested and compelled to take themselves, and that they accepted to do so throughout all of their generations, and that they had already started doing a similar holiday on their own, or similar celebration on their own. And that's where we get the holiday Purim from. But the whole book is an amazing book. And that's it. We got back to chapter 3. We're going to end it here because I've run over time. And I wish everyone, I can't wish you all a Purim, happy Purim, because as I mentioned, Purim was a month ago, right? One of the things that's pointed out is it should be kept in its time. That's mentioned a number of times, okay? Such as in Esther 9, where is it? Let's find it. For instance, in Esther 9:31, and it's emphasized, I think we saw 2 other times, that they should be kept at their right time. Well, as we mentioned, the right time cannot be the 13th month, because with the biblical calendar, we don't know whether there's going to be a 13th month or not, often until the beginning of the 13th month. So you keep it on the 13th month, there might not be a 13th month, right? If Aviv is found sometime throughout the 12th month, or let's say Aviv is found after the 15th of the 12th month, then it will not be a 13th month. And if you didn't celebrate in the 12th month, then you're out of luck. So really, it implies with the biblical calendar that it should be kept on the 14th and 15th days of the 12th month. And other than that, yeah, I think I'm going to end there. So thank you all for joining me. See you all again soon. Please share, like, and subscribe, as that helps get the word out. I would really like to increase the amount of people that come to these Torah studies. We'll see you again for our regular Torah study. Every Shabbat, we have a regular Torah study, the Parshat Shavua. And if you're interested in getting the details, then you can just follow the World Alliance of Qara'im Facebook page, or you can join the Alliance of Qara'im Facebook group, or you can join the WhatsApp group. Those are the best ways. So thank you all very much, and Shavua Tov. Rabbinical Purim Sameach, I'll say that. I guess I really shouldn't, but okay. Throw them up this time, and we'll see you all again soon. We'll go out with some music.
מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מאמש, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רק אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מרים השם, עושה שמיים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם.